Welcome everybody. Welcome to week number 3 in CU101. Happy Wednesday. I hope everyone is doing well. We are 2 weeks in at this point, so congrats to you on that for making it this far. I hope you enjoyed the chicken work last week. And if that's something you haven't done a bunch, hopefully in going through that process, you see all the benefits of breaking down whole chickens and everything that you can do with it once it's broke down. Especially, what like we kind of hammered real hard on was the financial benefit of breaking down a whole chicken. You get the opportunities to get any of the cuts you want, any way you want those cuts, and it can really extend your dollar as far as like feeding your family, by getting that at a cheaper price per pound. Chef Jackie, I know we still have some assignments to grade, but overall, how do we do on that chicken breakdown?
Overall, it looked really good. Week 2 is one of my favorite weeks because you get to break down a chicken. We jump right into it. It's definitely something you're going to do in this industry all the time, and not just one, but a 40-pound case of them, which has 15 to 20 of them in there. It's definitely a skill needed to be done. A lot of people said they had struggled getting the wishbone out. And the wishbone, I will admit, I don't take it out. Chef Luke, I know, does. So it all depends on how you were taught to break down a chicken. I probably should take the wishbone out. I know there's more meat in there if I get that wishbone out. But it's just not part of my chicken breakdown muscle memory routine. Same thing with the Python cuts and the oblique cuts. Remember, on the oblique cut their oblique cut, we're not looking for a specific measurement, a specific size. We're looking for consistency. I didn't need it against a ruler. I just wanted to see it all laid out and looking the same. And most people got that really well. There's my piece of advice on the oblique cut. Start at the fatter end. It's easier to make the small, skinnier end longer to be the same size than it is to make that fat end really small because you started on that skinny end of the carrot. So keep that in mind. Python cut, remember, it's that tile cut. There was a few people that I saw more of like a medium dice or something in between a Python and like a Brunoise cut or a small dice. It's at 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch by 1/8 of an inch thickness. But with all of these, just keep doing them. If you're going to have chicken for dinner, go buy a whole chicken. If you're going to cook and eat carrots, cut them oblique cut just to practice. Cut them a Python cut just to practice. You're going to make mashed potatoes. Cut them in a medium dice just to practice. Yes, you're going to boil them, you're going to mash them, but practice them. You'll see when we send out, or when you look at assignments each week, we tell you that you need to do a knife cut. I know one week we do a Brunoise onion. Do we have anything this week, Chef Luke, that's specific measurement-wise? I think it might be a small dice onion in one of the bean recipes.
I think we're doing the Brunoise onion and the rice pilaf.
Is it? Okay, I knew it goes. I definitely know it goes in the risotto. That's my favorite one. I know it's a Brunoise onion there, but I definitely want to just keep practicing. Every time you pick up a knife, use the pinch grip. Every time. Get into the habit of using that grip. It'll take a little bit. You're only 2 weeks in. It might take another week or two before that pinch grip really is just the default, but get there. You'll see it benefit in the long run. But yeah, overall, nice job. Narrative. I do want to touch base, and I want to circle back around the narrative, but I do want to touch base on one very important question on the narrative. That's the text me instructions question. Now, I get a lot of people who are, I don't like to text, or I wouldn't text this, I would call you, or I would show you, I would talk you through it. If you're going to talk, fine. Instead of text me instructions, if you were going to talk me through the instructions, type out what you would say. I need to see that. What that question does is it shows me your understanding of the technique. Again, we'll talk about this week after week. We don't look so much at recipes. I'm not looking for you to give me a perfect, I mean, I want to see it because it shows measurement technique and many things when you follow the recipe. But I need to see more so that you can do it. And by being able to type it out and tell it back to me, guarantees or should guarantee that you understand this technique. If you've ever heard somebody talk about when you learn something, you remember 95% of what you learn when you have to teach it to somebody else. Imagine that you're teaching this back to me. You're explaining back to me what the technique was. So what do I have to do to break down a chicken? What do I have to do to make a paisan cut? This week, what do I have to do to make my beans? What do I have to do to make my rice pilaf? Beginning to end, that's what that question is. And it comes up every week. You will never not see this narrative question. So.
Yeah, the reason we listed it out to say, how would you text me these instructions? The spirit behind that is we don't want you to list out. The first thing that you need to do is to go to the store and buy this and this and that. We don't want a story. Give me the bullet points. Give me the quick, fast version of it. I want a quick list. Do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. So it's not necessarily text like I'm actually texting it to you. It's how would you do it? How would you tell me how to do this in shorthand, right? That's what we're going for there on that. That's why it says text. It's like, don't get hung up on little stuff like the texting part of it. The spirit behind that is give me the highlights. Give me the quick version of how to do this. Is the reason we list things out that way. But yeah, we'll get more into that because your narrative gets a little more in depth this week because we're actually cooking food. Yay! Knife work. I tell you guys, knife skills translates to life skills. That's for real. Okay, that's why we spend 2 weeks on knife skills. But now we're getting into what you guys really came here to do, and that's to cook. This week we're going to start super simple with something that a lot of you probably already have experience with. We're doing rice and beans. Really the overarching topic for this week is grains and legumes. So really grains reaches further out than just rice. There's bulgur and buckwheat and all that kind of stuff. And then, when you talk about legumes, that goes far beyond just beans, right? And also, you've also got peas and lentils and nuts and all that kind of stuff as well. But really, the very most common version of grains and legumes is rice and beans. It's the one most people are familiar with. In fact, if you got a chance to watch my welcome video this week on the class page, I talk about how rice and beans are so important to the world, right? More people consume rice and beans as a complete source of protein than consume meat and fish as their number one source of protein, right? Here in America, obviously we're, relatively speaking to the rest of the world, very blessed to have very quick access to pretty much any kind of protein you want, right? And that's why, meats and fishes are the main protein for the most part for a country like where we live. That's not the case everywhere around the world, right? Luckily, though, to the rescue comes rice and beans. Rice and beans are easy to grow in bulk, right? You grow acres and acres and acres and acres of rice and beans. They're relatively easy to harvest, which is great. They grow in all kinds of climates, which is really nice. They can also, what's very important about rice and beans is that they dry very well, obviously, right? And that's what really helps out, the people who need to consume that as a main source of protein, because once they're dried out and they last, pretty much forever. I mean, eventually they're going to start to get a little stale in flavor. They'll start losing a little bit of flavor. But for the most part, rice and beans, once dried, stored in a cool, dark place, are going to last dang near forever. Most of you probably actually have some dried rice and dried beans in your pantry right now. I know I do. I always do, and that's because of, we'll talk about in a little bit, but, lessons I learned as a chef where, things that you can keep they're cheap, they don't take up a lot of space, and they last for a long time, always have those on hand because they're always handy to have. But they dry well, which is great, which means we can store them. Another thing, excuse me, that's great about having rice and beans is that depending on what ingredients you put in there, they can very easily be vegetarian or vegan dishes. Obviously on their own, they are vegan. And if you cook them without any sort of meat products or meat stocks or anything like that, then they can be totally vegan. You may not be a vegetarian, you may not be a vegan, but as a chef, you encounter people that are all the time. And it's not about what you like to do. It's not about how you like to cook. It's not about what you like to eat. It's about what you can sell and what people will pay you for. Okay. So being able to pull out a vegan or vegetarian version of rice and beans, if you need to, is a great skill to have. And that's why it's awesome to keep those on hand all the time. The other benefit about rice and beans is that they're relatively inexpensive. I mean, you can almost go to a convenience store and pick up a bag of rice and a bag of beans for $1 a piece. Obviously you can get much more expensive versions of it, sure. And it may not be $1 everywhere, but you guys understand what I'm saying. They're relatively inexpensive, okay? Especially if you're talking about like rice and beans versus a T-bone steak, right? Rice and beans, super cheap when we're comparing those two things together. So that's a great benefit as well. Again, globally, that's excellent because, obviously, again, we live in a very lucky society relative to the rest of the world financially. And in the rest of the world where people have more financial struggles, that rice and beans is a main staple because it is inexpensive, which is beneficial as well. But that's also beneficial to us, right? It's nice to have a relatively inexpensive option in the pantry all the time, both at home and as a professional chef. Again, they don't take up a lot of space, they don't cost very much, and they store well. What more could you ask for either from your pantry or from your dry storage as a professional cook? Say you've got a big party coming in last minute. You don't have time to order a bunch of product. You don't have time to run to the store and pick up some stuff. But guess what? We got a bunch of rice and beans in the pantry, so we can bang out a baller dish, right? It also helps you to extend your proteins. When you think about something like a arroz con pollo, if it's got red beans in it, right? Red beans, you can put a little bit of chicken in there and a lot of red beans and rice, and it stretches it out, right? Or maybe you throw in some sausage or something like that. It helps those proteins go a lot further, which again is great for you as a home cook if you want to stretch your dollar, or as a chef, again, trying to stretch that dollar, right? It's all about that perceived value. I can give you a big old bowl of rice and beans with a few pieces of sausage on there, and wow, you look like you got a whole bunch of food, right? It's going to fill you up, so you're definitely going to feel like you got a great value. From my perspective in the kitchen, running those numbers, I saved a bunch of money. And everybody got good food, so that's what's important. Rice and beans, again, very global. There's all kinds of versions of it. There's red beans and rice. Like I mentioned, arroz con pollo. Usually when I've had it, it's got beans in it. There's versions all over the world that have their version. There's places all over the world that have their version of red beans and rice. So again, it's a great option for you, especially as a budding chef or somebody who's looking to expand their repertoire. Start researching those international versions of red beans and rice. It's a great way to introduce yourself to new flavors and new ingredients without having to spend a ton of money on trying all those new flavors and ingredients with different kinds of proteins. So that's a great option for you as well. Rice is the thing we're going to focus on first. We're going to do a rice peel-off this week. It's important to know that that peel-off is a technique, okay? A lot of times you'll see on a menu rice peel-off, or you'll see at the grocery store a box, rice peel-off, right? Well, it's a technique, not a recipe, All right. There's really three main techniques for making rice. Three main methods. There's the peel-off method, which is the method we're going to be doing this week. There's the risotto method, which is the method you'll be doing in week number 9. And the last one, the one we really don't like to use, is the pasta method. The pasta method is just what you're thinking. Boil water, add rice, cook it till it's done, strain it out. Okay, but when we use that method to cook rice, it's, as you've seen when you're boiling pasta, it's a very volatile process, right? There's a lot of convection in that pot and everything's moving around. And what happens when you do something like that, it's great for pasta, and we'll talk about pasta a lot next week. It's very strong and it's got great gluten bonds and all. It can stand that boiling water. The rice is not as much. When you boil rice like that, it starts to bang against itself, especially because you got a million of them in there, and they all get all broken up, and it messes with the texture, and you end up with some undercooked pieces and some overcooked pieces, and it's not the ideal way to cook rice. In a pinch, if you had to, you could. Okay, so it's good to know that is an option, but 9 times out of 10, it's going to leave you with the least desirable texture of the final cooked product. So we want to avoid it if we have to, but in a pinch, last second, I got to have rice really, really fast, and the texture's not, our number one concern. Well, then maybe you can pasta method, but we want to avoid it. So I'm going to say risotto method for week number 9 when we actually do risotto. This week we're focusing on the peel-off method, which is very similar actually to a braise, because what we're doing is we're going to start with a high heat, then we're going to go down to a lower heat until our food is cooked to the tender consistency that we want it to be, right? In this particular case, by the time the rice is cooked, all of the liquid will be absorbed. That's not always the case with braises. A lot of times you're going to have leftover liquid. In this case, we will use all the liquid when your finished product shouldn't have any liquid at the bottom. But excuse me, let's talk about the types of rice real quick before we get too much into it.
Chef Luke, I want to backtrack just a little bit because
Sure.
some of the questions in the chat.
Mm-hmm.
Clarification: pasta method. Lots of water, rice goes in, boil it, you taste it like it's dried pasta. When it's soft, you drain it. Steaming rice is more of a different technique where you measure a ratio. You have your 2 parts approximately of rice to 1 part water. Put it in the pan, steam, cover. The water absorbs. You'll get a little bit of a better product that way than the pasta method. Pasta method, you're going to strain it. Steamed method, you're not going to strain it. So it's not quite the same technique. Peel-off method takes this sort of steaming method, but adds layers to it. So when we go over that, you'll see where those are similar. But no, pasta method is literally pasta, rice, or water, rice, cook until done, drain. Steaming, baking, that's rice, water, cover, steam. Water will absorb into the rice, not the same technique. So just lost something different completely.
Yeah, it's going to seem the second half of the peel-off method is similar to just steaming rice, but there's a very important step before that. But let's talk about the rice real fast. This week we're going to be using long grain rice. Medium would be fine as well. This is the standard rice that you're all probably used to all the time, right? Jasmine rice, basmati rice. These are the rices that you encounter all the time. Standard white rice. Do not buy parboiled rice. That's going to jack up your cooking time and your finished texture, okay? So just if you're like, what's parboiled rice? Don't worry about it. Just make sure the bag doesn't say parboiled on it, okay? Basmati and jasmine, those are your winners.
And no minute rice, please. Uncle Ben's minute rice, 90-second rice, that's not going to work for this.
That is parboiled rice, yeah.
Yeah, you got to get your Walmart long grain, white or brown, but I would highly recommend for this week, white rice.
Yeah, brown rice is not as processed as white rice, so it takes longer to cook, okay? So this particular method doesn't yield the best final product with brown rice. Also, wild rice is a mixture of like white rice and brown rice and some grasses. So don't get wild rice either. It changes the cook time as well. straight up plain white rice is what we're looking for this week to execute this. So what you guys are going to start seeing over the next few weeks, we're going to start introducing you to these techniques. And again, we're going to have some very specific ways we want you to do them because of the technique. Okay, we've provided you, we'll look at the recipes here in a minute, but we've provided you with recipes on how to do these. And the recipes are specific to the technique. Okay, that's what our concern is. So we're going to start giving you some potential substitutions and modifications as needed for financial or dietary concerns. But for the most part, we want you following these recipes because of the technique that we're working on each week. All right, and then we'll give you guys some ways that once you get past the assignment, you can start going crazy with it and having some fun and ramping it up. But right now, our concern is learning the classic techniques. All right. So that's the rice we're using this week. We'll talk about short grain rice later on when we do risotto. Okay. Excuse me. So let's talk you through the peel-off method. So I specifically don't have the recipe pulled up because I want to show you guys where to find the recipe. Now, you remember we talked about in week 1, all the way here at the top. Again, I have a lot more extra stuff on here because I have an instructor view. But all the way here at the top, you see this shopping list. You're welcome to check that out. It's got a good list of stuff on there. You do not have to have the absolute specific things listed on this shopping list. Okay, if you have what you need to get the assignment done, then you're good to go. All right, so don't think that you have to go out and buy, a very specific, I have a 2-quart sauce pot and it calls for a 3-quart sauce pot. Don't go out and buy a 3-quart sauce pot. Your 2-quart sauce pot will be fine. Okay, same goes with the ingredients, right? Some of those you may already have at home. Sometimes we can give you a substitution or a modification. If you're not sure, send me or Chef Jackie a note. Hey, the shopping list calls for canola oil and I have vegetable oil. Is that going to be okay? Yeah, that'll be great, right? So if you're not sure, send us a note and ask. We may be able to help you save a little bit of cash, right? Which is nice. Where I suggest you get your shopping list on a week-to-week basis moving forward now is right here in the recipes, okay? Directly under the assignment page, there's the assignment page that gives you the required photos for the week, right? Right underneath that is where your recipes live every single week for the rest of this class. All right, so that's where you can find those. So click on these, read all the way through the recipe and go, oh, you know what? I have all the equipment I need for that. Or I even have all the ingredients I need for that, right? Or that's when you send us a note and say, can I use this instead of that? Do I have to have this? And we'll walk you through it if we need to, okay? So check out the recipes before you get started with anything, all right? So let's talk about rice peel-off. You'll click on this, it'll open up this PDF for you, and it's got a step-by-step recipe. These go hand in hand with the technique videos. You'll notice if you've already watched this week's videos in the research material, myself and Chef Chris don't give you any amounts, right? We don't give you tablespoons and teaspoons and cups and all that kind of stuff. The videos are just about the technique, okay? The videos do match up with the recipes as far as the steps go, okay? We have listed for you guys here the recipe. Notice this says it yields 4 servings, okay? That's 4 general servings. If you got a bunch of big eaters in your house, this may not make a full 4 servings, right? Also depends on what you're gonna do with the rice. Is it the base of a dish? Are you making fried rice out of it? Or is it just going on the side, right? So you gotta think about that. If you are just one person, then you can absolutely divide this down as needed. If you're gonna feed 12 people, multiply it up as needed. Chef Jackie and I are not concerned with how much of the final product you make. We are concerned with you executing the technique and getting the required photos.
If you're going to go up or down, the important part is, however, that your math is done correctly. So if you're not sure if your math is right, or if you're not sure if it'll go up correctly, reach out. Again, like everything else. You're going to do, this is for 4 servings, you want to serve 12, so you have to multiply everything by 3. Well, that does kind of become a lot, and that's okay. But just double check if you're a little bit unsure of the math. It's better than having a product not come out because one number or one decimal place ended up in the wrong place.
Yeah, absolutely. As always, reach out. If you're not 100% positive, shoot us a note and ask. We're happy to answer. I want to make sure this turns out right for you. Okay, so if you're making those changes and you're not sure, ask, and I'll help you do the math and make sure it gets done right. What's important when doing the rice peel-off method is the rice to liquid ratio. All right, you'll notice here that we ask for 8 ounces of rice. That's by volume, 8 ounces of rice, half a cup of rice, or sorry, 1 cup of rice, to 14 ounces of liquid, almost 2 cups. All right, so that ratio of rice to liquid is 1 to almost 2, just barely, almost 2. So like if you were going to cut this in half, you would do 4 ounces of rice, half a cup of rice, and 7 ounces of liquid, almost a cup of liquid. Okay. You'll notice in the instructions here, we're going to heat butter in an oven-proof saucepan. We want a saucepan that can go on the stove, can get covered, and then go in the oven. Okay. So if you got a saucepan that's got a lid on it that can go in the oven, great. If the lid can't go in the oven, you can wrap it in foil and then go in the oven. Okay. If you have a saucepan that cannot go in the oven, you can do this on the stovetop, but you really have to pay attention, and your timing is going to be a little bit different. Okay, we'll talk about that when we get to the actual cooking part. Okay, so we're going to start with some butter. Whole butter is fine. If you want to keep this vegan and you want to start with a little bit of oil, that's fine too. We just need some fat in the pan. All right, then in goes the onion. Brunoise. Remember we did the brunoise back in week 1, so we want to see those perfect little squares of onion. Okay, there's one of your required photos is showing the onion next to the ruler. So we want to see beautiful, perfect squares of onion, okay? We're going to throw that onion in with that butter, and we're going to cook it until it softens, but not brown it. That's called sweating, okay? That's where we want to cook it to it starts to get translucent, but before it browns, okay? So manage your heat on the stove. Like Emerald says, that's why there's a dial. But also, if you throw a pinch of salt, just a little tiny pinch of salt in with those onions, and this is the same anytime you sweat stuff, you throw in a little pinch of salt, it'll help start to draw moisture out of that vegetable and will help prevent it from browning. It can still brown if you don't pay attention and your heat's too high, but it will help. All right, so I always throw a pinch of salt when I'm doing the sweat. Now we're gonna add the rice. Some recipes you may have read call for washing the rice. If you're like, what does that mean? Don't even worry about it. Rice goes from the bag to the measuring cup to the pot, okay? We're gonna stir, stir, stir. We wanna coat all these pieces of rice with some of that fat, whether it's butter or oil, okay? That's where this is different from that steaming method, right? We're gonna get all that coated in fat, and that's gonna help our rice not stick together when we're done. That's what's gonna help us have individual grains of rice, because that fat's gonna cling to the outside of each of those grains and will help keep them separate while they cook. All right? Once that's coated, again, if you leave that rice in there too long, it'll brown. So don't let that happen. But once those are all coated in some fat, in goes your liquid, right? This says boiling as long as it's hot, all right? Don't just pour water or stock straight from the fridge. Warm it up because if you pour cold water in there, that'll crash the temperature of your pan and jack up your whole time on the process. This one's all about timing. So you want to have your liquid hot, okay? Chicken stock or water, if you want to do a combination of those, that's fine. Either one is fine, okay? We're going to pour that in there. Make sure none of the rice is sticking to the bottom or anything like that. Give it a quick stir. And then you can give that a quick taste, all right, for seasoning. Because you can season this again at the end, but if you really want that seasoning to get in the rice, you want your liquid to be seasoned so when the rice absorbs that liquid, the rice becomes seasoned, okay? So give it a quick taste, see how that tastes. If you need to throw in a little more salt, you can. If not, either way, all right? Now throw on your lid, throw on your foil, and you're gonna go into a preheated 350-degree oven for 18 to 20 minutes. All right, here's where the big red caution sign goes up, and we go, right? 18 to 20 minutes is a very general rule, okay? If you live at altitude, right, you live up in the mountains, you know water takes way longer to boil and everything takes longer to do, right? So that 18 to 20 minutes ain't gonna work for you. It's gonna take a while to do your rice peel off in the oven if you live at altitude or on the stove. Rice just takes longer to cook. But you are already aware of that, and that is something that you know, and so you can deal with that. But for the most part, generally speaking, 18 to 20 minutes is going to give you the right finish on this rice. Now, when we give you a time, and we rarely give you times, generally, I think Chef Jackie said it last week, when you say, how long do I cook this? We say until it's done, okay? And I used to want to strangle my chef instructors when they told me that, cook it till it's done. But then I got in the industry and I realized, oh, everything just cooks till it's done. It's not about the time, because what matters on the time is there's so many factors, right? How hot was your liquid when it went into the pan? Are you making a double version or a half version of this? Is your oven actually at 350 degrees? Just because you turn the dial or punch the numbers to make it say 350 doesn't mean it's 350 in that box, okay? And that calibration gets turned off. Sometimes it's hotter on the top than it is on the bottom. It's hotter in the back than it is in the front. The back right side is hot and the front left side is cold, right? Who knows? Everybody knows their ovens differently. So that 18 to 20 minutes is a general ballpark. Okay, if you give it that 18 to 20 minutes, you let it sit for 3 to 5 minutes to finish steaming, you open it up and there's liquid inside, it's not the end of the world. Just put the lid back on and put it back in the oven. Let it cook a little bit longer, right? Taste it, make sure it's done. But more than likely, if there's liquid in the bottom, you're gonna have crunchy rice and it just needs to cook a little bit longer. Not the end of the world, okay? If you open it up and it's totally dry on the inside and all your rice is exploded, not the end of the world. You can still eat it. That will be fine. Do not throw it away. Eat it. Turn in the pictures and say, I opened it up and it was dry on the bottom and all my rice was exploded because I cooked it too long, right? The actual finished product of your food, we're not as concerned with as we are about you understanding what went wrong. That's what we're concerned with. Do you understand what you did right and what you did wrong? If you can explain that to me, like Chef Jackie said, you learn so much when you teach it to somebody else. And that goes the same when you're just telling somebody what happened, right? That helps you retain the information. And when you explain it to somebody so that they understand what you understand it a little bit better, right? So if you show Chef Jackie that you know why it's all dried out and overdone, you're good to go. Okay, that's what's important. And well, like we've mentioned so many times, I'm sure you heard 1,000 times, you learn more from your failures than you do from your successes, right? So don't get down on yourself if it doesn't go perfectly. As long as you understand why it didn't go perfectly, or you reach out and say, I don't know what I did wrong because I did everything that it said to do and it still didn't come out right, okay? Then we have the opportunity to give you some feedback, all right? So get that rice cooked, get it done, let it sit for 3 to 5 minutes, open it up, fluff it with a fork, there you go. If you want, which I recommend, throw a big old spoonful of butter in there. Quick note on butter. Anytime you hear us mention butter in this program, in this class, we are talking about real butter. We are talking about real unsalted butter, okay? We want unsalted because we want to control how much salt goes in our food, okay? That's very important. When you buy salted butter, it can be saltier on one end than it is on the other, right? There's no way to perfectly distribute all the salt in that thing. So we don't know how much salt is in there. That's going to affect the final flavor of our food. We want to be in control of that, okay? Also, we use real butter because margarine is not butter, okay? I grew up with a tub of crunchy country crock in the fridge, and we put it on toast and all the time, okay? I know, it's delicious, all right? But here's the thing. It is, once you get into real unsalted butter, it's so hard to go back to the margarine. Chemically speaking, margarine is like one step away from plastic, right? Margarine never goes bad. That's not a good thing, okay? Think about that going into your body. Right now, I'm not saying if you've got a tub of margarine or stick of margarine in the fridge to go throw it away. Okay, no way. That's money. You spent money on that, you eat it. Put it on your toast and all that kind of stuff until it's gone, okay? Eat it. I don't have a problem with it, generally speaking. It's what we're talking about, cooking these classic techniques. In some cases, as we move forward, the margarine would actually ruin the technique, okay, because it does not act the same way chemically as butter does, all right? So that's why we harp so much on butter. When you see salt in these recipes, when we're talking about salt, we're always 100% of the time talking about kosher salt, okay? The blue box with the little girl in the umbrella, right? The kosher salt, that's what we like to use. One, because it's the industry standard. Almost every kitchen that I've ever been in, and as far as I know, 99.9% of professional kitchens use kosher salt, okay? Another reason is because you can feel it, right? You can pick up a pinch of that, and you can throw a little pinch in there, and you know about how much that was, right? Try to pinch and throw in some of that regular iodized table salt. It's hard to pinch, right? You can't really pinch it and throw it. Also, when we use kosher salt, we can see it, especially in further class and further techniques when we're doing like sauteed and grilled proteins. I can see how much salt I sprinkled on that food, right? When you use that iodized table salt, it vanishes as soon as it hits moisture, and it's gone, so we don't know what's there. Also, the kosher salt, in a lot of applications that we'll use, it doesn't completely dissolve away, so it actually gives a little bit of texture, which is really nice. The other quick note on salt is, you're going to start using more salt when you work in professional kitchens. Everything is more seasoned than most people season at home, okay? That's why restaurant food tastes so much better than a lot of the home cooking that we do, right? Why is their food so much better than mine? It's probably considerably more seasoned than yours is. I know that was the case for me. I didn't realize how much more seasoned it was. Now, that doesn't mean that we're using a dangerous amount of salt. That doesn't mean that it's an unhealthy amount of salt. Unless we're talking about popcorn or potato chips, nothing should ever taste salty, okay, when we're cooking these recipes, all right? So don't be afraid of the amount of salt that we're having you guys put into this stuff, okay? What happens is that salt opens up the taste buds in your mouth and allows you to accept more of those flavors in the food, okay? It's not about we want you to taste the salt. We want you to taste the food, and the salt creates a physical reaction in your mouth that allows you to receive more flavors from the food that you're eating, and that's why we use as much salt as we do. All right? Now, if you've got one of those pots that cannot go in the oven, you can do this on the stovetop. Here's how. You got your pan at a nice medium high, so you melt your butter, you sweat your onions, you add your rice, you coat them in fat, in goes your hot liquid. As soon as that hot liquid, and I mean as soon as that hot liquid comes to a boil, you turn that temperature down to low, you slap a lid or some foil on top of that pot, and I mean low, all right? And then you got about, again, I don't want to say a specific amount of time, but it's somewhere between 15 and 20 minutes, okay, to get that done. And it's, again, your stove is different from my stove. Electric stove is different from gas stove, is different from induction stove, right? Those are all these variables. The thickness of your pot comes into play and all that kind of stuff. That's why we do the oven method. Even though there are a lot of variables in the oven method, there are fewer variables in the oven method than there are in the stovetop method.
The oven method is my favorite because in the restaurant industry, you're not going to make 4 servings of rice. You're going to make 40 servings of rice. You're going to make a hotel pan worth of rice. In that oven, you're not going to put it in there and forget it for 45 minutes. But if you put it in there and at 20 minutes you're in the middle of something else and it goes to 22 minutes or 24 minutes, you're probably okay. it's going to come out still. You go 24 minutes on the stovetop, there's a good chance you've burned the bottom of your rice. And in the oven, that's not happening. There's a lot. The oven is much, much more forgiving.
Yeah, on the stovetop, the heat's only coming from the bottom. The oven method is coming from all around. So it's much more gentle. Got a lot more wiggle room in the oven. And that's the rice pilaf.
Yeah, there was a question about the chicken stock because the recipe says chicken stock or water. Now, we are going to make chicken stock in a few weeks, but if you do want to use chicken stock this week, when you go to the grocery store and buy it in the box near the broth, near the bouillon, near whatever you purchase, you want to find the unsalted or low sodium stock. You can use a broth, but if you really want that flavored punch, you look for the stock and go unsalted, because just like we say you have to use unsalted butter, you want to control your seasoning. And the salted versions of this stuff are salty. That is when you will taste salt. Your rice will taste like potato chips. It will be salty. You want to taste chicken with maybe a hint of salt. And when you're learning to season it, cook it, taste it. Add a little more salt, taste it again. Add a little more salt, taste it again. And you'll take it just to the point where it goes, okay, now it's salty. Okay, next time a little less salt. That's okay. These first couple times, again, we're looking at technique. And what I find salty, Chef Luke may not. Or what I think is perfect, Chef Luke is like way too salty. I'm not worried about that taste, but you do want to practice how to season. It's a big piece of this industry as well. You are cooking for yourself, but food needs to taste like what you cooked. Salt is your friend. It is not going to harm you, not in a serious manner, unless you're putting your whole box of kosher salt in your rice pilaf this week.
Yeah. Yeah, something that's a little too salty is not going to directly harm you, right? Now, if you eat too much salt all day, every day for 15 years, then we got a problem. But that's not what we're talking about, right? We're talking about seasoning. Taste it, season a little more, taste it, season a little more. A lot of food can take a lot more seasoning than you think it can. I'm speaking very generally, right? Based on my experience working with my own personal experience and working with new cooks. You'll taste something and you go, well, that could use a little more salt. And they go, really? You go, yeah. And you taste it and you go, a little bit more. And they go, really? You go, yeah. And you taste it and you go, and they go, really? You go, yeah. Just a little bit. And then you finally get that sweet spot. You go, okay, now try that, right? And what I encourage you, if you want to play the season game like that, get what you think is the final product, right? Scoop a little out and save that, okay? Taste it. You're like, okay, that's good. Scoop a little out and taste it. Add some more salt, taste it, and if it's not too salty, you go, ooh, that's a little bit better. Save that little scoop. Now add a little more salt and taste it and go, okay, now it's too salty, okay? Then go back and taste the other ones. Right? And you can see where you're like, oh, okay, there's my sweet spot, right? And when you taste that one that was seasoned perfectly, and then you go back and season the one before that, you go, man, that really did not have enough salt, and I thought it did, right? So it's all about those learning experiences. And if you have that opportunity to test and taste test and test and taste test, take it, absolutely. If you've got the time to do that, then absolutely try to do those things to try to improve your palate. Again, like Chef Jackie said, taste is so subjective. Seasoning is very subjective. That's why we don't really focus on the seasoning. We talk about how important it is to season and that you should season aggressively. But obviously, we can't taste your food. What's important is if you can execute that technique, then whoever you go work for will tell you how they want it flavored and how they want it seasoned. Okay? If we can teach you how to make a pilaf, you can go make that pilaf however they want you to make it. All right, that's what's important. Let's talk about beans. We're going to be doing beans this week. You'll notice we gave you two options. If we go back to the class page, there it is. You notice there's two options. You only have to do one of these, okay? You guys only have to do one of these. I saw some people talking in the chat. They might try to do both. Hey, more power to you. If you want to try both, go for it. They are both delicious, all right? But you only have to do one of these, all right? It's up to you. Either the first one is white beans Bertone style. It's kind of an Italian style white bean. You cook these beans with aromatics, then you strain them out, and then you finish them in a pan with some tomatoes and garlic, and they're really nice. The other option is pinto beans, Mexican style. These go into a pot and they cook from start to finish in that liquid with those aromatics. They're finished with a little bit of fat. You'll notice the recipe calls for lard. That's the traditional finish on this. If you want to keep it vegetarian, you can finish with butter. If you want to keep it vegan, you could finish with a little bit of olive oil. That's up to you how you finish that. But just a little bit of fat is all that wants, because the beans themselves don't have fat. All right. So we want to add a little bit at the end. And what that does is helps with the mouthfeel, helps the way they taste and all that kind of stuff in the finish. Okay. And then those are not really strained out. Those you just serve in their flavorful liquid. And they're pretty yummy. But there's two options. You only have to do one. What's important is that you get the required photos. Okay, we'll look at those in a sec because we're going to talk about beans for a minute. Beans, again, widely available, relatively inexpensive. They store well, they store great. The first thing you want to do when you open a bag of beans and you dump it into the container before you soak it is sort through it. Okay, right? Because when beans get sorted in the factory sorting process, you know what else is the same size as a dried bean? A rock. So you want to go through those dried beans and look for any foreign objects. Usually it's rocks. I would say probably every third bag of beans I go through, I find a rock in one. And doesn't matter how long you cook it, that's not going to get tender. All right, so you want to make sure and go through and find those if they're in there and get those out of there. All right, then we are going to absolutely soak these beans overnight. All right, that's really the technique we're doing this week, is cooking soaked beans. All right, have to be dried beans, absolutely no exceptions. You have to start with dried beans. Whether you choose the white beans or the pinto beans, either way. And when we talk about white beans, you can use Great Northern beans, you can use cannellini beans, you can use lima beans. Whatever kind of white beans you want to use is fine. Pinto beans, that's pretty standard pintos, right? You could do that recipe with black beans as well if you wanted to. Pinto beans Mexicana. But we're going to sort our beans. We're going to soak them overnight. Now, can you cook dried beans from start to finish without soaking them? Sure you can. However, the texture is not as pleasing. And the likelihood of you having undercooked and overcooked beans in the same bite is much, much higher. It's infinitely greater. Okay? What soaking the beans does overnight is not only soften those shells of the beans, but it also evens the playing field. Because when you soak all those beans overnight for the same amount of time, whether you have smaller beans and bigger beans in there together, whether you have some beans that already have a higher moisture content than the other, they're all going to reach like a terminal velocity if soaked. So when they soak overnight, they should all be the same amount of hydrated, right? They can only be so hydrated, but soaking them overnight will get all those beans on a level playing field. If you try to cook them from dry straight to start to finish, you don't have that same opportunity. Because once you introduce heat to the party, everything's different, okay? So we soak them overnight. So you want to put them in any container, doesn't matter what container you use, as long as it's a container that's large enough to hold all your beans and then twice as much water as you have beans. Okay, does that make sense? Because as they absorb water, they're going to swell. And we don't want some of those sticking out of the top of the water because they're not getting fully hydrated. You want to make sure they stay underwater all night long. These, you could slap a lid on this if you want. That's fine. You don't have to. I put a lid on it in case the kids knock it over. But that's up to you. They can sit out on the counter. Totally fine. They don't need to go in the fridge or in a dark place or anything like that, right? Don't leave them out on the back porch all day. That's weird. But overnight in your kitchen on the countertop, they're going to be totally fine. Okay? If you're worried about them being knocked over or something falling in them, then you can put a lid on top. Okay?
And for safety's sake, you have your one amount of beans, twice as much water, container 3 times as big.
Yeah. Yeah, because as those beans absorb the water, they're going to raise that level and everything, okay? Big container, beans, water, lots of extra space in case things go crazy. All right, so you absolutely must soak beans. So you know what that means? There is 0 chance of being on time if you start this on Tuesday. Okay? Because you got to soak the beans overnight. If you go buy beans next Tuesday, you're automatically late. Just like that. So go ahead and get those beans. You got to plan ahead. That's an important part of being a chef. It's an important part of being successful in the food service industry is planning ahead. All right? So you got to know, if I'm cooking beans tomorrow night, I got to get those beans soaking tonight so that they'll be ready. All right? Seasoning beans, it's important that you wait to season the beans at the end. Okay? Now, if you did some kind of bean recipe where you're going to saute a bunch of veggies first, or you're going to start with some bacon or something, and you add some salt to those sauteed veggies, or the bacon's already got salt, right? That's okay. That's an okay amount of salt to be in the beginning process of beans. But in these two that we're doing, the pinto beans and the white beans, we're going to cook those beans all the way through, then add the salt. The salt hardens up the shell of the bean. And so sometimes if you try to season too aggressively at the beginning, those shells will seize, and then your beans, it's like, why are these beans have been cooking for 4 hours and they're not cooked? What's going on, right? Because that salt seized up those shells, okay? So we want to wait and season beans at the end, okay? That goes with your salt, your kosher salt, or if you're using some sort of, for other applications, if you're using some sort of pre-mixed spice mix, okay? And that's important as well. When you buy those pre-mixed spice mix, read the ingredients, because I bet you salt is on there. And so what we like to try to do is avoid those with salt in them, because we want to control how much salt's going in. Okay. Excuse me. And that's seasoning the beans. And then, in general, there's a gajillion different bean recipes out there, right? They're all a little bit different. But if you follow those steps of soaking your beans overnight and then seasoning at the end, you're going to be all right. All the steps in between, that's all about the flavor, right? Soak at the beginning, season at the end. And what I like to do when you're like, okay, I think these beans are probably about done, I like to get a spoon. I like to do the 5-bean test. So here's the deal. If you get a spoon and you eat 1 bean, you might have got the one lucky bean that's done, right? And then you're like, I tasted 1 bean and it was done, and none of these other beans are done, right? That's why I do the 5-bean test. If you try 5 beans and they're all good to go, then you're probably good to go, all right? We want the beans to be tender, but not exploded, just like the rice, right? It should be tender. It doesn't get stuck in your teeth, right? We don't want that. If it's stuck in your teeth, it needs some more time, right? But we want them to get done, but not exploded. And that's where practice comes in. And again, you're going to be working with different burners, with different pots, with different beans, with different liquids, all kinds of stuff. It's all going to change. So it's important that you learn in these processes how to really pay attention to what's going on. You're adjusting your heat as needed. You're checking on, like, don't put it on low, slap a lid on, and go watch a movie. And they'll be done when I get back, right? Pay attention. You don't have to stand there for an hour, right, while they're cooking, but check in on your beans every few minutes. Give it a good stir. Maybe you weren't paying attention and the heat's too high and they're getting scorched on the bottom or something like that, right? Give them a stir, give them a check, give them some love, and pay attention. And that's how you get better at this stuff, right? And that's what you guys are here to do, is to get better at this stuff and learn how to do it the right way. So practicing it well will help you get better at it. I'm gonna let Chef Jackie talk about narratives and stuff.
Yes, I do want to talk about narratives and required photos and assignments in general.
then real quick, I'm going to cover the discussion forum for this week. Okay.
Go for it.
And then we'll let Chef Jackie take it away for the assignment. So overall, good job on the discussion forum last week. Again, I apologize that you had to watch that video, but it's important that when you're working in a professional kitchen, you can spot when those sanitation errors are happening, right? And it gets a little awkward when you have to call somebody out for creating a sanitation error, right? Maybe you're not going to be their best friend anymore, but we're trying to keep people from getting sick, right? That's our number one concern, is the health and safety of our guests and our coworkers. So if you've got to be the bad guy, be the bad guy to make sure that people stay safe, okay? We talked about last week in that discussion forum that you only had to do a post. You did not have to reply to anybody. Although I did see some great discussions, and I really appreciate that. This week, you do have to reply to 2 classmates, all right? So let's pull up that discussion forum real quick and look at that. So here it is right here, right under the live session. You see food memory. Look, a bunch of people are already in there talking. That's fantastic. But here's what we want you to talk about. Food is what brings people together. In fact, it's what brought you and your classmates here, embarking on your culinary journey. So here's what we want, is your favorite food memory, okay? And a lot of people are gonna go, I don't have just one memory, right? Pick one. You probably have a top 10, right? Don't say you don't have any, because if you say I don't have any, I don't have just one, then I'm gonna say, all right, pick one, okay? And you're not gonna get full credit. So just pick one and go with it, okay? Is it a certain cooking experience? Is it a memory of cooking with a family member? Is it a dining experience you had? Some people will talk about, I ate at this great restaurant and I knew it. I was like, I got to cook for a living, right? And then how has that inspired you to start here to Escoffier? Okay? Tell us why it's so meaningful. So don't just put like, I remember cooking with grandma, right? That's a great memory. I have great memories of cooking with my grandmother, but I would tell you a whole dang story about it, right? So that's what we want. We want to share those experiences. Again, here at this online experience is so great. It offers the opportunity for so many people to chase their culinary dreams. But the one thing we don't get is that one-to-one interaction with our classmates. The discussion forum gives you that opportunity to share your experiences, your knowledge with your classmates. And maybe you open somebody's eyes to something cool and different. Maybe you have a shared experience. I bet there's going to be a lot of cooking with grandmas in there. Where people had that, like, I love cooking with my grandma too, and then everybody's gonna get all teary-eyed reading the discussion forums. It's great. I love it. It's a really cool part of this experience. So I really want to make sure you guys get in there and jump on that. So your initial post, you talking about your memory, is worth 8 points. Okay, and then you need to reply to 2 classmates. Each of those replies is worth 1 point apiece. Okay, and that's how you get the total 10. The full score on that. All right. Make sure that's done no later than next Tuesday, and I'll remind you about it as well. As I'm sure you guys are like, yes, you will remind us about it because you remind us about everything. So lots of messages coming your way as we go through this program. But I know you have busy lives and there's a lot to do. So we want to make sure that you guys, especially here in the beginning, are really staying on top of everything that's required of you. And sometimes you miss something in the live session or whatever. So we want to send lots of messages to make sure that you're aware of what's needed of you on a regular basis. So make sure you're checking those messages. And along with that goes your feedback. Check your feedback on your assignments, because a lot of times you may get opportunities for improvement. And with that, Chef Jackie would like to chat with you about assignments a little bit.
My turn. Let me share my screen here. So, week 3 assignment. This is what your screen looks like. I switched into student mode, so it should look exactly the same. You have your 8 required rice pilaf photos, your 6 bean photos. Now, one thing I do want to clarify. I know we talked about red beans and rice. I know there are recipes for red beans and rice where it all gets cooked together. I don't want that this week. Please don't submit that. I want rice pilaf using the technique we've shown, beans cooked using the technique we've shown. And then every week after the list of photos, you have your narrative reflection sheet. Your narrative reflection sheet this week looks a little bit different than the ones from week 1 and 2. It looks like, I gotta move this because I can't get to my bar. It looks like the one you saw in orientation. So fill it out completely, please. I know I say it every week, but fill it out completely. Challenges, situations, issues, things that worked out really well, things that didn't work out well. You need to complete the narrative, but there are 2 specific questions on here that are, I'm going to show you the rubric, that have certain weights to the question. They are worth certain points. First is this flavor wheel, taste, texture, consistency, and aroma. On one narrative sheet, because don't forget, I don't need multiple narrative sheets. I don't want multiple narrative sheets. I want one narrative sheet that covers everything. So this week, your one narrative sheet covers your beans and your rice. You describe the taste of the beans. You describe the taste of the rice. Texture, consistency, aroma. Using this flavor wheel, it is shared. There is the link right here. You click on this, and it takes it to you. I understand that there's a lot of words on here. Try to get into these first 2 windows, these first 2 rounds. Look at mouthfeel, look at aroma, taste. Now I realize texture and consistency here are their own sections, so grab something, think about it. We are working on some more detailed information to share, but it's not ready yet. If you have questions, let me know. I can either help, I can point you in the right direction of resources, or give you some definitions. But there are a lot of resources out there that you can use. So make sure you are really, just like the text me instructions question, which is on here too, that's where I'm looking to see that you understand and are able to describe what you made. Again, taste. I'm not looking for good. I'm not looking necessarily for tasted like rice, tasted like lemons. Okay, well, what does lemon taste like?
It was delicious. Like, yeah. That's not what we're looking for.
That's where you tell me down here. Did you enjoy this? Yes, I enjoyed it. I learned a new technique, and it was delicious. That's where I want to hear that. So make sure you are filling these narratives out completely, please. Now, in your assignment, you have the rubric. It shows you exactly, again, what, and I've been over this, but I want to reference it again, what I'm grading. Time management, submitting it on time, 15 points. Just for submitting it by Tuesday, completed, full assignment. That was the other piece, my other note. Please don't submit half assignments. So if you did the rice on one day, don't submit the rice and then say, Chef, I'll submit the beans, on Monday. I submit the rice on Friday, I'm submitting beans on Monday. Hold on to your rice and submit rice and beans on Monday. Submit it all together. But again, on time, submitted by Tuesday, not on Tuesday, but by Tuesday or by the deadline. 15 points. Your narrative, it's complete. So answering all the questions gives you 20 points. Production notes. Now this is the text me instructions question. That's where this 5 points comes from. You completely summarize the process for the technique and prep. So what ingredients you used and how you had to share what was covered. And then the flavor journal, which is those for that chart. Not that. This chart here is 10 points. Self-ID and professionalism. So full uniform top and bottom half, showing with a tag that says the week and the date, gives you 5 points. And then making your sanitizer correct is 10 points. So I'm going to do the math backwards because it's easier. 65% of your grade, submitting on time, completely doing the narrative, wearing your uniform, and making sanitizer. 65%. You pass. You could burn your rice and overcook your beans till it turned into mush. You're still going to pass. But if you've done your narrative correctly and you took a mise en place photo that looks like this, this is mise en place, cut, portion, measured. It's pretty. Shopping list, shopping picture. This is what I bought at the grocery store. I don't want this. I want this. And if you see, we'll go back to the photos. It says mise en place, all ingredients should be ready for production. Everything's cut, everything's measured. It's all laid out. that gives you 15 points. You give me a shopping photo, you're getting 8 points. You don't give me anything, you don't get any points. And then last but not least, to get your 100. So again, you can butcher this assignment, but you submitted all your required photos, you did your narrative, and you submitted on time. You burned your rice and you blew up your beans, but you told me in your narrative where you messed up or what you're going to do differently. You get 100 because you learned something. Now, if your technique comes out perfectly, that's where our product is prepared to standard, to technique. That's what we're looking for. So always go through and double check the rubric. It doesn't change, but make sure you are going, okay, I've done this. I've done all of this. I expect to get this grade. If I don't, look at the rubric. It tells you why, so does your feedback. If you're expecting to do really well and you get a 15, I can almost guarantee you your link wasn't shared properly, and I tell you that in your feedback. You can resubmit. I know we've talked about this, but again, resubmit. Watch that feedback. Look at the rubric, figure out where the error was, and resubmit. Don't wait until Tuesday of the following week to try to resubmit. You get your grade back and there's an error, fix it right away. You get your grade back and you don't understand it and the feedback doesn't make sense, send me a message. Please, please send me a message. I don't know that you're not understanding until I get the information. But that is what I would like to see every week, because there's no reason. Again, we're not looking for perfection. We're looking for knowledge, growth, improvement. And that will get you 100. If you're chasing the 100, that will get you the 100, at least on your assignments. Maybe not in the course, but at least on your assignments.
And a big part of that, remember, we talked about those required photos because those are critical points in the process. So you'll notice that each week those photos, the required photos are going to change depending on what we're doing, because there's specific points that specific things have to happen for you to be successful with that technique. And getting those critical photos is what allows Chef Jackie to see where things went sideways if things go sideways. Okay, so that's why we require those specific photos. But another reason we have a very specific list of required photos is because following directions is one of the most important parts of being successful in the food service industry. Just following directions is so very important to your success. When I first got into the food service industry, I showed up on time and I asked questions and I did what I was told. And that's just because that's how I've always done everything, right? And then, I kind of started moving up faster than some of the people I started with. And I pulled the chef aside and I said, Chef, that guy's been here longer than me. How come I'm getting to do this and he's not? I said, because you show up on time and follow directions. He doesn't. All right. Well, then I'll just keep showing up on time and following directions. So following directions, we want to see those critical points so we can give you the best feedback possible. But also just being able to follow directions and showing that you can follow directions is a great sign of professionalism. And will get you, I guarantee will get you farther in this industry, following directions. Okay. And sometimes, you're going to have to follow some directions that you're like, there's a better way to do this, right? There may be a faster way. There may be an easier way, but it may not be the right way. Or the person that you work with doesn't know the faster and easier way. But guess what? You work for them. So, maybe you bring up your concern. Chef, I know there's, and don't do this like on your first day, right? Make sure that you got a good rapport and you're like, hey, this guy knows what he's doing, right? So then you can say, Chef, I know of another way to do this. Have you considered this option? And maybe they already have it. You don't have the equipment or the ingredients or whatever, right? But maybe they have, right? You bring it up as like, there is this other way to do this. Not like, don't go, my chef instructor said, because guess who's cleaning the grease traps? All right. So that's not the way to approach that. It's after you've established a rapport and you're there and you show you know what you're doing and you can follow those directions, then maybe you can bring up those opportunities for some efficiencies. And I like to use that word efficient because efficient means we're saving time and money. All right. Until you are in charge, you are the one following directions. That's always important, which is hard for especially people changing careers or people who've been in the industry a long time. It's hard to swallow, just doing what you're told. But trust me when I tell you that to a point that gets you so far in this industry. Go ahead.
Efficiencies are good, but we're not looking for cutting corners because that affects quality.
Very different.
Very, very different concepts and aspects of this industry, because you will see a lot of people in this industry who've been in the industry for a little while will cut corners, but it does affect quality.
Fast is not the same as efficient. It's not. A couple questions. Clifton. Let's see. I think you're going to have to unmute yourself, Clifton.
I wanted to ask, does it affect any part of our grade? Like I turned in my assignment last night, like 1 hour before it's due. Does that affect any of our grade, like how fast we turn it in or anything like that?
As long as it's in before 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time, you are eligible for full credit.
That's a bit.
Once that clock changes to 12:00, 85% is now the best you can get. Once it goes from Tuesday to Wednesday in Central Standard Time, right now, if you live on the East Coast, you have till 12:59 a.m. Wednesday to submit. If you live on the West Coast, you only have until 10:59. But your week started 2 hours earlier, so it's not like you're losing out. You had more time on the front end. But as long as it's in by 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time on Tuesdays, then you're eligible for full credit. After that, 85% is the best you can do. Cool, thank you. I'm going to grab these other 3 questions from Monica, Victoria, and Amber, and then we're going to kill the recording, okay? Monica disappeared. Let's go to Victoria and see if Monica comes back. What's up, Victoria?
Hi, just making sure you can hear me.
Yep.
Okay, awesome. It was about the onion cut. What would you say would be the best way to do the really small dice? I'm not really familiar with dicing the onions.
That's an excellent question. And Chef Jackie's looking at me like, we always talk about this.
I forgot it. I was going to, in my whole spiel, and show them where it was, and I forgot.
So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to send you guys to the link to the technique video that we have on our website that shows you how to dice an onion.
Okay, yay. That was my concern. I could do it with a potato, but not the onions.
Great question. I'm going to make myself a note real quick to do that. All right, cool. All right, I'll send that out as soon as we're done here.
All righty, thank you.
Amber. What's up, Amber?
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yep.
This is connected to a speaker. Okay, so my question was for our assignments, how many errors when it comes to grammar? I know so many times that people will proofread, but then when they finally look again, they notice, their grammar is off somewhere. I want to know how many errors in like one assignment that you'll start taking off points for grammar.
0. Yeah, it's not an English class. But I mean, do your best, but we're not gonna. Sorry, we're getting some feedback, I think, from the speaker there. Chef Jackie's not gonna pull out a red pen and like start circling all your stuff, right? That's not what we're concerned with. We're concerned with you conveying the information as effectively and efficiently as possible.
Okay, thank you.
If you're typing it in, you get those red squiggly lines underneath. Then use the spell check and stuff to get your stuff spelled correctly, mainly so that your information is not misunderstood, right? That's as long as she can understand what you're saying, then we're going to be good to go. And if she needs clarification on something, she may ask you, hey, I'm not sure exactly what you mean. Can you shoot me an email and explain this a little better? But that's not going to affect your grade directly. as long as she can understand what it says. Am I
Further
right,
on,
Jackie?
further on down the road in the program, there are a few courses that grammar and spelling are important. You write menus and things like that. You can't give a poorly written menu to a customer.
Yeah.
But that's later on. As long as I understand what you're trying to tell me, we'll be okay.
Monica's back.
Yes, hello.
Yes, ma'am.
I had an issue with submitting my narrative. I don't know if it's like a difference with the directions for a laptop versus a Chromebook, or I have no idea. I don't even know if I did it right, or not, because I couldn't figure out how to save it and fill it out. I had to go in Word and do it. So I don't even know if I did it right this week. I can't even recall how I did it last week, the first week.
Okay, shoot me a message or shoot Chef Jackie a message, and we'll take a look at your specific assignment and see if it got submitted correctly. And if not, we will get you the resources to make sure it does get submitted correctly.
I kept getting an error message for Google for Drive. So I don't know, maybe that's what was wrong. Maybe.
Okay. And if you start getting error messages about stuff, that's a great opportunity to call student support. If you got an error message, I'm probably not going to be able to solve that for you, especially not over the phone. But those guys over in support may have a quick fix for that because they know a lot of that kind of stuff. So when you start getting error messages, if it's more than just like where does this go or how do I do that, then call that support number at the bottom of the class page, and those guys can help you out with that kind of stuff. But go ahead and shoot me or Chef Jackie a note, through the messaging here or an email, and we'll get to look into your situation.
Okay. All right.
Cool deal. And then Samuel. Oh, Sam went down.
Yeah,
It's back
I'm
up.
here.
What's
Okay.
up? Nope, hang on. I think you muted yourself back.
All right, can you hear me now?
There we go.
Okay, I understand doing the checks, the assignments and getting everything with like the practical part of the course. But my problem is once I do try to submit, I forget this is like my first time getting accustomed to Google Drive.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll read the instructions, and I did it last week. I had to get some help from the next day on that Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
Last night when I was trying to submit it because I'm on the East Coast, so it was about like at 11 something. I traversed it for 2 hours, and by the time when I finally figured out, hopefully submitted it twice. It said it I already had submitted it. It was around 1:30, so it was like an hour, like 30 minutes difference. So is there any way that you guys kind of can review that, because I'm an older guy, so I need some help trying to do that.
Well, we'll take a look at that. Send me or Chef Jackie a note, and we'll look at your situation specifically.
Okay.
To take a look at that. But the company answer to that is don't wait till Tuesday night. Because if it was Monday night and it took you an hour and a half to submit, then you're fine. Right? So that's going to be the big company answer to that question. But go ahead and send us a note, and we'll look into that specifically for you. And trust me when I tell you guys that moving forward, the submission process is going to get much, much easier. We understand not only are you trying to learn this culinary stuff, you're also trying to fit school into your life, and you're trying to learn new technologies. So we know there's a lot, you're trying to get, you're juggling a lot of balls in the air. But once you get that submission stuff taken care of, once you get it figured out, that's not going to change moving forward. So that one goes in your pocket. Once you figure out how to adjust the time part to your life, right, with your family and your work and all that kind of stuff, that goes in your pocket. Now you just got that one ball to juggle, right? And that's just learning the culinary stuff, okay? So as we move through this program, really this first 12 weeks will give you a great idea. You'll have all the submission process down, no problem in this first 12 weeks. You'll have the time management pretty well dialed in at the end of this 12 weeks, because some of the stuff we do is pretty time consuming. So you'll learn to get it all adjusted in there. And then it's just all about the cooking. So we get that there's, this initial hurdle to get over. and we want to make sure that you guys are getting over that. So when you have those issues, if something's taking you longer than like 15 minutes, send somebody a note and try to get some help. But if you're sending those notes, after 10 o'clock, it may not be till the next day till you get those responses. So if you send the note at 10 o'clock on a Monday and then you get the response Tuesday morning, you get all day Tuesday to either review tutorial videos or get somebody on the phone and talk you through it and all that kind of stuff as well. So that's why we push the early submissions, all right? And that's week 3, you guys. I'm going to go ahead and cut off the recording so it's not too long for everybody watching the recording. Thanks for watching the recording. Everybody wave to everybody watching the recording. Thank you guys for joining us here live this evening. We appreciate it. If you have specific questions about your assignments and your grades on those assignments, reach out to Chef Jackie. If you have big questions about the industry, about food, about our class, that kind of stuff, life issues, reach out to me. If you have a life situation going on and you need a resource and someone to talk to, call your student success coach. Any technical issues with your devices or our website, call the student support team. Their number's at the bottom of every page on the website. All right. Thank you guys very much. We appreciate it. As always, any questions you have, any situations you have, reach out to somebody and let us know what's going on. And whoever you reach out to, if they're not the person, we'll get you in touch with the person that you need to talk to about that situation so that we can make sure you're being successful in this program. Because remember, especially in this first 4 weeks, you got to be passing this class. You have to be above a 60%. And the best way to get that done is to turn everything in. All right. Thanks again. We'll see you next Wednesday.
Good night, everybody.